All right, so we are recording. You guys can start whenever you would like.
Okay. Hello, Sarah. We are Pat McPherson and Susan Creighton, partners in our business Narratus, which creates archival collections for individuals, families, and organizations. Today is June 26th, 2021, and we are interviewing Sarah Pilzer. We are at Susan's home in Greenfield, Mass. The complete audio interview will become part of the Marlboro Morris Ale Archive, which will reside permanently at the Vermont Folklife Center in Middlebury, Vermont. This is interview number 1 with you, Sarah. And we're going to be talking about the Marlboro Morris Virtual 2020 and the Marlboro, just a little bit, and the Marlboro Morris Virtual 2021. Right?
Yeah.
So.
And also, maybe a little bit about Sarah's original recruitment to the Marlboro Morris Ale Committee.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that first.
Oh gosh, the hardest part first.
So the question is, when did you join the Marlboro Morris Ale Organizing Committee?
I think it was 2016, but I don't actually remember.
And Susan, you were saying about Sarah's recruitment to the committee. So why?
My
Did you put it
understanding
that
is
way?
that one joins the Ale Committee by invitation.
Oh,
The Ale Organizing Committee.
Generally, that is yes. We could look at the bylaws later, but the Ale Committee is made up of members who are nominated by the members of the committee to join the committee in future years, and then once that nomination has been made, somebody from the committee will reach out to that person and invite them to come if they want. And actually what I do remember is that I was invited to join the committee, and I initially said no, because I was, I believe, still in grad school. Though, really, honestly, I don't remember the timeline very well. If I was still living in New York, or if I had come back to Boston by that point and had started grad school or not, which would have been before 2016. So I actually have no idea what year it was. I could find out, I'm sure. But I do remember they asked if I was interested in joining the committee, and at the same time asked if I was interested in taking over for Paul Eric as the barker, who is the person who does all the announcing during the show stands. So at the mass public show dance stands, there is a person whose job it is to say what teams are coming up and to make announcements to the crowd. And originally this was Tony's job.
Tony Barron.
Yep.
And that's Paul Eric Smith, known as Paul Eric.
Yep. And I think Doug Creighton did it for a while as well. So Paul Eric had been doing it. I don't know how many years he'd been doing it, but he was interested in leaving the committee. He had been on the committee for a while and wanted to step down, and then also was interested in transitioning that role. And I guess my name came up. I don't know who suggested it. You'd have to ask somebody who is on the committee at that time. But I said yes, I was interested in being the barker, but I couldn't necessarily commit to being on the committee yet. So I basically apprenticed to Paul Eric.
That's all right, because we can edit all this stuff out here, so.
Okay. You want us to correct the Paul Eric thing?
I mean, do you want to just start again?
Okay, hang on. I'm going to now, we've started recording. Okay, go ahead.
So I was initially approached by the Ale Committee in 2011 to join the committee, but at the time I was in grad school and thought I would be doing a lot of research during that time, so I turned them down, but did agree to apprentice to Paul Eric to be the barker. And then the next year, I think, or after that ale, I was approached again and said, hey, we're still interested if you want to still be on the ale committee. And I said, you know what? Okay, let's do this. So that was very exciting.
we're going to correct the Paul Eric thing. His name is Paul. And somehow there were a lot of Erics, and he became Paul Eric. Oh, no. His name is Eric.
No.
His name is Sam.
We'll let him do this. We can just edit that part
just
out.
edit. Take all
You
that
could
out.
just call him Paul Eric.
For God's
and
Yeah,
sake.
exactly. Right.
forget who he is exactly.
So since then, your role on the committee has generally been to be the barker. Anything else in particular?
So my role over the years has evolved. The barker is in some ways a committee role, but is also like independent of, like, it only happens at the ale itself. So that's one of the things about being on the committee, is there's a bunch of jobs that happen at the ale on Memorial Day weekend, and then there's a bunch of jobs that happen throughout the year, and those aren't necessarily I don't know, they're just different. They're different pieces of it. And so I think the first year I was just kind of shadowing. I didn't really have a like set role aside from barking.
Yeah.
But then it somehow, I guess, when whoever, I think it was JT, so John Todd, was what they call the squire of the committee. And so, like, on a Morris team, the squire is the role that takes on all the administrative details of running a team. So for the ale, the squire of the ale is the person who is in charge of, is sort of like the person in charge, or the one who coordinates everybody else. And that role has been held by multiple people over the years. When I joined the committee, John Todd was doing that. And he was there for my first couple years on the committee, and then decided to step down. And he had been doing the program book, which generally speaking, we have like a program book. There's also been multiple iterations of that, but every year we do a book that is for participants of the ale, that have the lists of teams that are coming, the schedules, directions to all of the stands, other miscellaneous information. And JT had been organizing that and putting that document together, and so then I took on that piece. That became one of my jobs. We also, every sort of unset number of years, but theoretically every 5 or so years, we decided to do like a bigger, flashier pamphlet that we could hand out at the public stands. That's like I think we've called it a field guide to Morris teams, and it just has a little bit about the teams. So people who have been coming for years to watch Morris dancing in Brattleboro or Newfane every year can learn a little bit about what they're seeing. And that's like a big color print version. So I also took that piece on. But that's not an every year thing. And so those are definitely 2 things I took on pretty early on. And with that came some other sort of graphic design type work. So the promotional poster that we put out every year, coordinating the art side of doing the t-shirts and button design. So we like to work with either artists in the community or local artists to commission a custom piece of artwork to represent each year of the ale. Rhett Krause on the ale committee does the logistics of ordering the t-shirts, but I've been helping coordinate with the art and making sure the files are all correct and all of that, and doing the buttons as well. And
the computer files.
The computer files, yeah. The digital art that we send to the printer to do the screen printing.
Yeah.
And sometimes, generally the promotional posters we do, at some point before I joined the committee, they decided, let's just use the same art every year so that it like is branding, right? But on those years that we do the special programs was also like sort of anniversary years. We said maybe we could have they used to do a different poster every year, the same way they did a different t-shirt every year. So we said, let's just do that every 5 years. So one of the years that I was doing it, we coordinated the poster with the t-shirt and the button, so it all works together. And then other than that, just main roles are being around to answer questions, make things happen, make announcements. So, yeah.
And that evolved as well in 2020 for the first time. So the world became a worldwide pandemic world, and so many things had to change abruptly, including the organization of the Marlboro Morris Ale. So do you want to take us back to that time?
Sure. Yeah, so really it was March of 2020 when all of this hit home that COVID was here and was going to mean that we weren't going to be able to gather. And there was still, even when we started talking about it, there was some amount of, oh, maybe by May things will be better, it'll be spring. It was still very early on in the pandemic.
Yeah.
But I think it was when we were having, the committee usually meets about once a month leading up to, so like January through April, once a month. And then in May, leading up to the ale, we meet more frequently. But, so this was probably in our March meeting or maybe April meeting when we heard that NEFA was canceled. And that was sort of like the analogous event for us that we're like, if NEFA's not going to happen, maybe we aren't going to happen. And I think we made the decision pretty early on because it became this thing of, if we need to make a decision to know what we're doing. And if we're going to have an ale, we need to start planning it now. We're already behind.
Yeah.
And if we're not going to have an ale, we need to make that early enough that we can decide, are we going to do something else instead? Or like, what's going to happen? And we had already invited teams to what we expected to be that year's ale, because we send out invitations usually in January or February. So like we had a list of teams that we were expecting to come, and so what we ended up doing is we realized we weren't going to be able to gather, we weren't going to be able to have the ale as normal, but we had this list of teams. Let's create an event, a virtual event that they could come to and socialize at. And I don't know whose idea it was originally, but we sort of came up with two things that we thought we could do. One is ask people to submit videos, put together a show stand, like we would have a mass dance stand, like we would have had at Elliott Street or Newfane in a normal year. And we would put a video compilation together to that and do a live stream. And then secondly, because a big part of the ale is getting people together to party and socialize, we wanted to do something like that. And so we said, okay, what if we had a bunch of Zoom rooms that people could go to see each other? And Peter Kruskal, who is on the committee and dances with Pinewoods Morris Men, said that they had done something with a bunch of Zoom rooms for their one of the Pinewoods Morris Men's Daffodil Weekend event. And so he had some experience with like, okay, here's how we can set it up so that people could have multiple rooms. It's like having multiple rooms in a house. You could go to this party room or that party room and that party room.
I just want to insert that we all say Zoom now, and we know what we mean. So what do you mean by a Zoom room?
So Zoom is an online application that allows you to video conference with other people who are not in your location. So everybody logs onto the app, and it opens up a screen that has a bunch of different people's webcams and audio available, and that is a Zoom room. So like you're in a room together, but you're on the internet.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we decided to have a bunch of that. And one of the things about Zoom is at that time, it was early in the pandemic, this technology had been around before, but not that many people used it. Like, it was more of a business thing for doing remote conferencing. And now in, June of 2021, there have been so many updates to that software, but at the time it was pretty limited what was available. So you could have like a room with some people in it, and that's it.
Virtually.
Now there's all kinds of things, like you can take those rooms and like have breakouts from it, so you can have the same main space that everybody logs into, and then you can like separate people out. We didn't really have that. I think it was available, but not as good as it is now. So we decided what we were going to do instead, because we wanted to have multiple separate spaces so you could have smaller groups, that we would have several different Zoom accounts that were running at the same time. So we actually ended up signing up for like 12 Zoom accounts for the month, so that each room that was represented, and we made a map of like, here's this room that represents the pub, and here's this room that represents the bus, and here's this room that represents the tents, and each one of those was run by a different Zoom account, though they were all run by us.
Right. Were there different hosts for each room?
Sort of. We ended up having, I think teams could sign up to host a room for an hour or so, which just basically meant be there, sign in and be there. But even then, like, there weren't a lot of the same hosting responsibilities that are now in Zoom. Like, there was no raise hand features or muting feature. Like it was pretty early on, so people were still figuring out how to use this technology.
Yeah.
But it worked pretty well. What I think Peter ended up doing this part, but we actually created like a PDF, I think, or maybe it was even, actually it was on our website, I think, like a web page that had a picture of the Marlboro College campus, which is where we usually party, and there was links on different places that went to these various Zooms.
Oh, awesome.
And so you could like be like, okay, click the link that says dining hall, and that'll take you to just a Zoom room. And that was the dining hall for that night, and you could see who was there, and you could then, if you didn't want to be there, you would close that window and then look back at the map and say, oh, I want to go to the bus, and click on the bus link, and that would open up a new window. And in the new window was whoever was on the bus.
Right.
And
then there was a link on the website to the show dance video? Or...
I'm not sure we even got that far. So the show dances, what we ended up doing for that was, and that was the thing that I mainly focused on. Peter Kruskal was setting up the Zoom stuff for the most part. I helped a little bit, but it was mostly Peter. And so the virtual show dance set, I was coordinating, and we asked people to submit videos ahead of time, and they sent those in, and then I ended up piecing them together. I think I used iMovie for that, because that was, at the time, the technology that I was using, and though it could have been a different one. I tried a bunch of different ones out for a while, trying to figure out which one I liked best, and I don't remember exactly which one I used for that, but I had each video, and one of the things that I had fun doing was, being the barker for the ale, I actually recorded little mini barking scripts for each team, and I went out and got somebody to video me announcing each team in my outfit, which is a bowler hat with feathers and a tailcoat and my Morris kit, and so like, and then I cut those in between all of the videos that were submitted to make a big show. That was really fun. It was a lot of work, though. Putting together videos is a lot of work, and I am no expert at it. So, of course, I had left stuff pretty last minute, so I was up very late many nights that week leading up to Memorial Day trying to get it ready. And then we had actually, one of the things I had forgotten about is we had been coordinating with the Midwest Morris Ale, too, because they were also unable to have their Memorial Day weekend gathering, same reasons, and they were going to do a whole bunch of other virtual stuff, and we'd sort of talked about, can we do any crossover stuff? So one of the things we were saying is we were each going to have our show dances doing a live stream that the other communities could tune into, so we made sure not to schedule them at the same time. And one of the interesting things was ours was first. So we went, I think, Saturday morning. I don't remember what time exactly, but probably like around 10 o'clock Eastern time. And I set up, I did not know anything about live streaming, except that you could do a thing where you had a video on your computer, and if you had a YouTube channel, then you could use a streaming service like OBS, which is a Windows streaming service. I don't remember what that stands for, if anything.
Okay.
And you could like play the video on your computer, and then OBS would like stream it to YouTube, and you could like switch on and off what screen was showing. So like you could either be showing the video or it could be showing your webcam. And so I set up like a green screen behind me in my office, and I put on my bowler hat and was sitting there, and it's like live from Greenfield, Massachusetts, where I am. And then I did an introduction, and then like switched it over to the YouTube video, or switched it over to the video, which was playing on my computer, and very quickly realized that I did not have enough bandwidth to make this happen smoothly. And so what ended up happening was, it was fine, but like the YouTube video for people who are watching elsewhere, and we did what like was a YouTube live, so people could comment at the same time as we were streaming it. So there was people commenting, and very soon they all started saying, why is it so choppy? Why is it breaking up? Why is it out of sync? And it turns out that like streaming it, like actually streaming it from my computer through OBS up to YouTube was, my computer couldn't handle it, or the internet couldn't handle it, or something. And so all of these beautiful videos that I'd spent hours putting together, the premiere of it was a little choppy. But it was a fun bonding experience, and these things happen, and it's one of those things like, stuff happens at the ale and you just roll with it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the number of times we've been at a mass dance and a thunderstorm has descended upon us, and you just keep dancing. You know, so it's not unusual for last minute panics to set in.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, you and Peter, and was it Rachel who was the squire at the time, Rachel Diamond Stone. So
Yeah.
you three were working pretty tightly together.
Yeah.
What about the people on the committee who were not really tech savvy? Because there are some,
Yeah.
inevitably.
Yeah, I think people who weren't really tech savvy or just were also busy with other stuff that they were doing. It was really, we didn't, I don't know, there wasn't as much for them to do. Or they didn't, it was hard to know how to delegate these types of jobs, especially because we were kind of making it up as we went.
Right.
So it was true that Peter and I ended up doing the bulk of the actual setup work, and Rachel was doing more of the communication work. And you know, we still kept meeting, but yeah, it was really more of a, it was not for a lack of wanting to help out, of course.
Yeah.
But on the committee was like, hey, let us know if there's anything we can do. And I'm sure there was things that they could have done, but I did not have enough capacity to both do the things I was doing and say, break it out into, here, you do this piece, you do that piece. It would be really great if we did this. And there was definitely a feeling of, let's just do something. Anything. It doesn't even have to be that amazing. Like, anything will be welcome.
Right.
Whatever we can get done. Though we definitely wanted it to be good quality, which is why, like, the stupid streaming thing I was kind of bummed out about. But the funny thing about that is that the Midwest Morris Ales, was going to be streaming the next day, saw that and they're like, oh, let this be a lesson to us. And what they ended up doing was uploading their video. YouTube has a feature that's called like YouTube Premiere, where you can upload a video but not have it go live until a certain day. And then on that day, it has all the same chat features as a live stream would, but it's actually already uploaded to YouTube, so it plays smoothly. And so they figured that out based off of our experience. They had been planning to do it like we were doing, and they're like, oh no, we're not going to do that. And so it was actually a really great moment of like cross-community helping each other out. And then I was like, oh yeah, we'll totally do that. Thanks for letting me know. I've learned something from you too. So, yeah, it worked out in the end.
How did you feel about, did you get feedback from teams? It went okay? Like,
yeah, overall, I think folks had a better time than they expected. definitely, aside from the choppiness of the video, everybody had a lot of fun watching the show dances, and especially later on, we did end up uploading the video to the channel, so it's still there. You can go watch it on our YouTube channel, and people loved seeing the creativity. Like, some of the teams, we just asked them to send us a show dance, but it ended up for some teams that turned into a skit or a song, and there was some really great stuff that got sent in, so that was really fun. People loved seeing that. And then for the party part, there was a lot of people who really enjoyed just connecting with each other through Zoom and ended up having a better time than I think they expected to. One very popular thing that every year at the end of the show dances at Newfane, which is on Sunday afternoon, we've been touring around all day on school buses assigned by teams. So like three or four teams get assigned to a tour. They go on a bus together. But at the end of the day, you can take any bus back to the college. And there is always one bus that is the bus, capital T, capital B, which is where the Toronto Morris men tend to be. And it's a rowdy, party, singing, fun bus. And so we didn't really plan for this to happen, but one of the Zoom rooms became the bus and had a Zoom sing led by Toronto very well, where on Zoom, you can't really sing together because of the latency of internet, but you can have one person leading a song and then everybody else is muted singing along at home. And so that went on for several hours. I don't remember what we set as the period of party time, but I do remember staying up way later than I expected to, partying, which is often what happens at Marlboro.
It's so interesting that this was only 3 months,
Yeah.
a very short 3 months into pandemic lockdown, and all of that joyfulness and creativity bloomed.
Yeah.
Creating things you had no conception of just a few weeks earlier.
Yeah.
It was pretty amazing.
Yeah, and I think it was nothing like being in person, but that was okay because it was still being together. And people were really, at that point, there was so much uncertainty still there was a lot of fear around getting sick. There was a lot of how long is this going to last? And so any sort of connection that I think people sort of forgot about that for the evening. And it was just oh, we are together. We still can do this. We're not losing this community. It's still here. Even though we're not together, we are together. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That was really important, I think, at that time.
Yeah. How many people do you think ended up participating? How many teams were invited?
Yeah, I think I'd have to go back and look, but it might have been 16 or 17 teams that year. I think every team sent in a video, which was pretty exciting because we weren't sure what to expect. Maybe we were going to get 2 videos. That was going to be it, right? Because I know for my team, Marlboro Morris and Sword, we ended up, everybody filmed themselves doing the Winster processional dance, and then we put that together and then set that in. Some teams were able to do a distanced video all in one shot, but there was a whole range of stuff, and so it was a big question of what our team's going to be able to send us or capable. But I think every team ended up sending in a video. And then in terms of the party, I know we had I'd say I don't remember the numbers of who showed up, but it was at least 50 to 100 people over the course of the evening. So it was great.
It's cool.
And I guess I should say, normally at the college we expect, I think our max is usually 300.
Yeah.
So a smaller proportion than would be, but
Mm-hmm. Do you suppose there were unexpected upsides to doing it remotely?
Yeah, I guess one thing is that we one of the upsides was collaborating with the Midwest Morris Ale. We ended up, in addition to, they did a whole program of like workshops and like baking contests, and I don't even know, you'd have to go look at their archives, but we did a crossover tour, this is what we called it. It was on Sunday, and it was a separate Zoom thing that we paired up teams from the Midwest Ale and from the Marlboro Ale to say, hey, your Zoom is from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time on Sunday. Just go and hang out with each other and meet each other and talk. And so normally these two communities are having a party on the same weekend in totally different geographical places, and there are teams that go to like alternate between the different ales, so there is crossover already in terms of individuals and people, but there's never really, or in my knowledge, there hasn't been a lot of organizational crossover. So it was really nice to work with them on this and like figure out, hey, since geography is not really a barrier this year, what can we do? And I don't know how many people, we often invite a team to join us from England. And on one hand, doing things virtually makes it a little bit easier for them because they don't have to get a plane ticket. But the time difference makes it such that an evening party for us is the middle of the night for them. So I don't think we had a lot of British participation in the virtual.
Yeah. I'd just like to say for the record is that we have lists of teams that were invited, so we don't need to talk about those names here.
Okay.
So, going forward a year, again, the committee is in this situation of, well, things possibly might be okay for in-person this year. You know, we have been vaccinated by choice and sometimes not vaccinated. So what is that going to mean? So when did your 2021 ale decision making start?
Well, we've really started pretty early on.
Yeah.
I think it was either the fall or very early winter. Normally, we get together in October to sort of start thinking about next year's ale, and we pick teams that we want to invite, and then we try to get the invitations out early in the year, like in January. And so I think even then we were thinking, it really starts with like, okay, well, if we're inviting teams, what's going to happen? Are we going to have an in-person ale or not? And I think at that point, it was still, vaccinations were just starting to happen. And so it was very unclear. We knew we were going to be right on that cusp. That many people could be vaccinated by then, but we still didn't know what was going to be possible. And because it's this, you have to start planning so far ahead. The other big factor is the Marlboro College campus, which...
Go for it.
Okay. So, I don't know the full story. I don't remember all the details, but in 2020, the Marlboro College was dissolved as an institution. Was the program itself and the professors and the students all got merged into Emerson College.
In Boston.
So now there's the Marlboro Institute at Emerson. The campus itself, which is in Marlboro, Vermont, and is where we have held the Marlboro Morris Ale for 46 years, 44 years, I guess, it was a big question about what was going to happen to it. Without Marlboro, the college, the institution, what was going to happen to the campus? And that was definitely going to be a part of our decision making, because we weren't sure if we were going to even be able to be there prior to the pandemic. There was questions about whether the campus was going to be available in 2021. We had started to consider some alternative venues. And so with that uncertainty, in addition to the pandemic uncertainty, those both influenced us into saying maybe this is another virtual year. In the meantime, things were developing. With the Marlboro College campus, it was bought by Democracy Builders, I think is the name of the organization, but it was unclear what their plans were for it. There is a whole other story that I'm not going to get into right now for time about that. But there was enough uncertainty that we were like, are we even going to be able to be there? And if not, we need to find a new place. And can we do that in this year when we don't know what's happening? And so all of those things together were like, you know what, let's just call it early. Let's just decide we don't want to have another virtual ale. You know, in 2020, we were very much like the first and hopefully only ever ale, virtual ale. But in 2021, we were just like, let's just make a decision now so that we can plan for something. So it was pretty early on, either I want to say the fall of 2020 or very early 2021, that were said, okay, no, we're going to be virtual again this year.
That's wise.
Yeah. And that was really, a lot of that was for the committee's sanity as well. Because the other thing is we were all adapting and we're taking on different roles, and in our own lives, like the committee, all of the committee members were dealing with a lot of other stuff too. And so I think the prospect of trying to organize an in-person event with so much uncertainty, like none of us had that capacity anyway.
Right. So, how did the decision to use Gather come about?
So we knew that we wanted to do something different from the previous year. Like the previous year had been fine and fun and all of that, but we're like, hey, we have more time to plan this. Let's see what's available. And again, Peter Kruskal and the Pinewoods Morris men had been using Gather, which is another virtual platform that involves like multiple people sharing their webcams and videos. But instead of Zoom, where you're just like in a static box, Gather has a little avatar that lets you wander around on a screen and then interact with other people and objects. And it is an even more interactive experience than Zoom is. And so Peter had been using it. I had used it a couple times outside of Morris context for a work conference.
Oh.
And then another, like a couple birthday parties friends of mine had hosted in Gather, and the Youth Traditional Song Weekend, who that happens in January. They had done a little Gather in addition to some Zoom stuff together. Both Peter and I had used it and set it up. Well, I hadn't actually ever set it up before. Peter had some experience designing it, and some of the other committee members had like known about it enough. They were like, yeah, let's give this a try. This could be fun. It's different. If it sort of unlike 2020 where we're like, we have to do something. This year we're kind of like, if we do something, that's great. Like, however well it goes. You know, at least that was my opinion, is like, whatever we do is going to be great. And we did know that the show dances had been so successful previously that we're like, yeah, let's do that again. And this time we knew about uploading to YouTube Premiere, so we weren't going to have the choppiness issue again. So I was like, yeah, I'll take care of that. And I had actually done a couple other video compilations for other organizations throughout the year, so like I was more skilled at that piece too, so I knew that was going to be easier for me. So I said, yeah, that's no big deal. Let's definitely do that. The big difference was, instead of, normally we are limited in the number of teams we can invite by capacity. And in fact, the biggest limiting factor is the length of the show dance. Because when you're in person, sitting and watching Morris dancing for like more than 2 hours is kind of, shall I say, tedious.
Controversial.
Yeah, I mean,
word there.
Personally, I say one big long show, like 2 hours is about the limit of at a time that you maybe want to do this activity. As much as I love Morris dancing. And so as the person putting the show together, that is also the job of the Barkers to decide what order the teams go in at the show dance, and to sort of and I've really been instilled with a philosophy from Tony Barron and from Paul Eric and from Doug that like it's street art, it's street performance, and the whole show has to have a cohesion to it. It's not just about, oh, this team gets up and dances, then this team gets up and dances, and then that team gets up and dances. There's a real art to putting it together. And so I've always felt like we've been limited in the number of teams we can have because of how long that show gets if you have more teams. And that's always in tension with the more teams you have, the more fun the party is. And, you know, you want to include more people, and you want to, you know, like, how do you make choices between which teams are invited? Because it comes off as this very exclusive, oh, are you invited to Marlboro this year or not? And it's really more about creating that show for me is a big drive of what that year's ale is going to look like. Yeah. And I think other committee members come at it from a different perspective. That is clearly my bias, given my role on the committee. So anyway, all of that said, for the virtual event, we were sort of like, well, yeah, we're still going to do this show dance thing, but like, if it's a longer video, we don't have a captive audience. They can come and watch it if they want. And what if we just invited every team that we've invited in the last X number of years, and whoever wants to come from that team can come. Like normally, you know, you expect a certain number of people from a team. Like if you only have 2 people coming from your team, that's like, the team's probably not going to show up because you can't really perform with fewer than a certain number.
Yeah.
But for a virtual event, since most of the event participation was going to happen in the party part, 2 people from your team want to come? Sure, no problem. And so we set it up as individual registration. We sent out, a lot of the communication always goes through the teams because it's easier to just email the squire from the team rather than emailing a big long list of who knows who the members of a team are at any given point in time. So you email the squire, and then the squire is responsible for distributing the communication. So we still invited teams that way, but then we said, hey, people on that team, come sign up individually if you think you're going to come. And we do have individual registration. We've done that for a number of years now, and it's like loosely correlated with who actually ends up showing up. You know, more than loosely, but there's some differences there. But for this, Gather, the way that Gather works is you have to pay for a certain amount of seats, basically, for a certain amount of time. So we needed to know about how many people were going to show up. And so that was part of the reason we also wanted to have registration and say, if you're going to come to this, let us know.
Yeah.
And not that we didn't, normally there is a fee to attend the in-person ale to cover costs. For this, we said, we're not going to charge for it, but we do need to know how much the ale is going to pay, because we do have some cushions. So we were going to just say we're going to cover the Gather costs and not make people pay, but we need to know how much it's going to be. So we had people sign up for that.
How many ended up signing up?
I don't know, actually. I know that at the largest count I think I had at Gather at any point in time was like 60 or 70 people were there at once. I think that's right. I know I wrote it down somewhere, but yeah, so we ended up fighting every team that we had invited in the last 5 years, I think. And of course there's a lot of overlap year to year. You know, there's some teams that we invite every single year, so that wasn't, 17 times 5 teams. It was more like 30 teams or something like that. And of those, not everybody sent in a video. Some people didn't sign up at all. I think some of the teams are probably not even active anymore, especially over the last year. I don't know how many teams have called it quits because of COVID. I haven't heard of any officially disbanding, but I don't know. But we still got, I don't know if it was like 15 submissions. It was about an hour's worth of material. So a good length show. And this time I did not record announcements for each one. I did some transitions in the video editing. This year I used wevideo.com is the video editor, which is a browser-based video editor that I really love.
And that's WEVIDEO?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. And depending on your subscription level, I have a pro subscription, so I have access to a lot of fun transitions and cool stuff, and you can like put in a still picture with some captions on it. But the fun thing I did this year, which I don't know where this inspiration came from, but it was like maybe like 4 days before the ale, and I was like, oh, I should make an introduction like Saturday Night Live. And so I called it Marlboro Virtual Live, and I did the like intro credits the same way they do on Saturday Night Live with the like video montage. I found a tourism video for Brattleboro, Vermont that had like a video montage of Brattleboro, and I put that up there, and then I had little video clips of each team that was in the show dance that, you know, I'd say, it's Marlboro Virtual Live on Saturday with Marlboro Morris and Sword, Rock Creek Morris Women, etc., etc. And that was really fun to put together. And it was just like a little intro piece. Yeah, that was super fun. And like, I do not know, like, I think it was the middle of the night inspiration, or like, you know, you're in the shower and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I have the perfect idea of how to do this. So, that was cool. And, yeah.
So again, this year it was Rachel is the communicator with the teams. Peter is handling... Peter Kruskal.
He did mostly the gather space and built a lot of what's there. You have to come in and do like pixel by pixel deciding what you want it to look like. And so there's a lot of like, there's an editor, there's a map maker, that kind of thing. You have to decide where the portals go to get between different spaces in the gather and all of the interactive features. So he and I did that together, but he was the main organizer of that part. I did the video compilation again. But we did get more involvement from the rest of the committee this year because we decided we wanted to do more pieces. And so we scheduled some, like, in 2020 we had that sort of spontaneous bus experience. We said, hey, let's repeat that. And so we asked Toronto, do you want to organize something? We asked actually every team, do you want to host a space? Do you want to do an activity? And so Rachel and I think Mary Sargent and Narissa Osborne and I don't know who else was involved in like organizing some of that stuff, but we did have more committee involvement in making those other things happen, as well as this year we did a t-shirt design. And so Rhett Krause, again, coordinated with the artist this time, who is, I believe we got Roberta, I'm not going to remember her last name, starts with a W. Wozak? Something like that. I'm sorry, Roberta, I don't remember your last name. She's done art for us before, and she designed a piece for us, and then I put it into Custom Ink, which is a website that allows you to do like group orders, and that'll get shipped directly to people. And so we had a t-shirt, and that involved more people. I think Amanda was taking a hiatus this year. And Arthur Davis he built the registration form and helped with that piece of stuff. And he also helped coordinate with, we had Tony Barron come and do a little like interview lecture part. So Arthur actually went to Tony's house to help him with that piece and was involved with getting him involved. So
that's neat.
Yeah, so it was definitely more of a team effort this year just because we had more time to plan.
Yeah. I'm interested, we were talking before about people who had actually been to the Marlboro College campus were able to imagine being there while they were interacting with this two-dimensional map that you and Peter created in Gather. Yeah. And speaking for myself, as someone who has been on that campus but for other reasons has never experienced being at the Ale on the ground. And so my experience of 2021 through the Gather portal was very different from those of you who had been on the ground during the event. So maybe you and Susan could chat about that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, for me, even though I built it and designed it with Peter and so like knew what everything was there, I still had the experience on the evening. We had the party on Sunday night, which would normally be the feast night at the campus, where we decorate the dining hall and everybody comes in and they're wearing a mix of fancy clothes and sweaty, dirty Morris kit, and you're drinking champagne and like all of those memories like flooded through my head as my little character walked onto the screen, because like I was superimposing them on top of the screen that I was seeing. I was like seeing the dining hall in my head as I looked at the two-dimensional 8-bit version of it that I was seeing on the screen. And I didn't expect that, but I also wasn't surprised by it. It was like a really nice feeling of like, oh, this is closer, like I'm one step closer to the actual experience because I'm remembering everything that was happening, and it was informed by my brain pictures.
Mm-hmm. And the attention to detail, I think, in the creation of the Gather space really spoke to how familiar you and Peter were with the whole experience of being at the Ale. So for instance, walking into the dining hall, you also had a little photograph of the front door of the dining hall superimposed there as you walk in. And for a lot of people, just seeing those front doors, there's a feeling of, oh, I'm here, and this is sort of the first place I go to begin my experience at the Ale. And then the map inside of the dining room had all the tables in the place that you expect to see the tables, and all the little side tables with the buffet in the place you expect to see them, and going up on the stage and what's up on the stage. Just all those little details helped make it feel like the real thing, rather than it just being, whatever, a 2D cartoon rendering of the Marlboro campus. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that really speaks to the fact that both Peter and I have been going to the Ale since well before we were on the committee.
Right.
So it does feel like it's funny because I don't know Marlboro College really outside the context of the Ale. I've been there. I've gone a couple times. I know friends who went there for school. I've been to like a concert there. But to me, it is so synonymous with the Ale. And it's so much, that experience of being there is so familiar. It's not a very big campus, and we don't use even all of it. So like the spaces that we use is really contained in a way that made it really fun to recreate. And I think the fact that both Peter and I are like, yeah, we know this inside out, allowed us to create a space that was so detailed, that we know that this path connects to that path. The fire pit is behind Rosie's pub. The tents are down the hill from the dining hall. And so you could create those spaces because we know it so well.
And what the important landmarks were, that we need to have a fire pit there because that's an important place people go to gather.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
To gather.
A well-named app.
Brilliant. And was that your experience as well?
Yes. Yeah.
Susan and I were sitting at her house in front of one screen, and I was feeling pretty detached from things, just waiting for someone to show, a little avatar to come, and then we could sort of engage, but you were so much more engaged than I was, because not only did you recognize the people and had a long history with them, so it was so much easier to chat, and they were asking about the archive, so then I could talk, but I think you were so much more emotionally kind of connected and excited to be in even that two-dimensional space than I was, because I didn't have any on-the-ground experience.
Our archive booth in Gather there was outside the dining hall, kind of in front and off to the side, and I kept feeling like I was, in a virtual sense, peering out of our booth, looking over at the dining hall going, I know there's people over there in the dining hall gathering and doing things, and I want to see what's happening in the dining hall.
Yeah,
and
so
sometimes my little avatar would trot over and go wander around the dining hall just for a quick trip to see what was happening before I went back to the archive booth.
right, and that was not like, no, we're just here sitting in front of the computer screen waiting for someone to join us, right?
Right.
But Susan wanted to wander off and find the people.
Yeah, one of before, so the party was from 7 p.m. till 10 p.m. Eastern time, ostensibly. And I logged in, I think we said we were going to open the doors at like 6. I think I logged on a little earlier than that. And I was going from place to place in Gather and like fixing this picture and putting this poster here. And it felt so remarkably similar to how it is when you're a committee member at the Ale. And I'm like, oh, I gotta go post schedules at the music hall, or I gotta go clean this bathroom, or like I was like, this is it. This is the committee experience of running around, and people were starting to show up, and I'm like, hey, sorry, I can't talk to you right now. I have to go do X.
And
like, that is exactly what it's like.
Right, and you were literally saying that, actually, in Gather.
Right.
Which is...
Right. That was a very surreal moment.
Yeah.
But very cool also.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
very
really
cool.
interesting. The power of a virtual app to tap into our imaginations and just link the two like that.
Yeah. And I didn't even, I literally was like, oh, I gotta go fix this thing and Gather. I gotta go put this thing. Oh, I wanted to do this before. Like, it took me a few minutes to realize that I was doing that committee thing. Like, because that was just what I had to be doing to be on the committee, to make it, like, I was setting it up the same way we set up the campus. And I was like, whoa.
And so what was your role as the barker this year?
Really just the, like, coordinating the video, and then at the Gather space, I was doing a lot of back-end stuff, but I didn't really have any public-facing stuff. We had talked about maybe doing some announcements, but decided that people were just going to figure things out on their own. And it was nice to just, like, once I was like, okay, I think everything is set enough, I was able to just go and enjoy the party.
Oh, cool.
Which was fun.
And did the bus thing happen?
It happened. Funnily enough, that was actually where we ran into bandwidth issues, because I think one of the things with Gather is it's constantly looking at, like, proximity, and if people are coming in and out, it'll turn on your videos or turn off your videos, and I think that was, like, kind of overwhelming it with the number of people that we had in that one space. And so there was some amount of, like, okay, are you there? Are you singing? And, like, people would start singing and then drop out halfway through their song. So that wasn't as smooth as it had been in Zoom, but it was still fun.
Yeah.
And it did happen. And it happened longer than the scheduled amount of time. Like, people were still interested when the scheduled hour was over. So I think people had a good time.
Have you got any feedback on the experience from the people that were there?
Not directly.
Yeah.
At the time, a lot of people were like, yay, that was fun. But no, we don't really we don't send out an evaluation or any of that.
Yeah.
So I'm sure, hopefully next year, 2022, when we are in person again, people will say, oh, that was so fun, but I'm glad we're back.
Yeah, it is up in the air still.
Yeah.
And sounds like maybe your first meeting will be sometime in early fall, which is like 3 months from now.
Yeah, I think we're actually planning to have a midsummer meeting this year, sort of as a wrap-up and as a get started for next year.
Yeah. Are there new people coming onto the committee? Old people going off?
Hopefully. I know that for myself, I am actually relocating to Burlington, Vermont, from Greenfield, Massachusetts, sometime in this fall, but I plan to continue on the committee. So I don't know how that'll shift my role and what I do. One of the pieces I have been doing is tour committee, the last couple of years, and we could talk more about that later, probably not today, but, so I know that's shifting a little bit. I've heard a couple other, like, murmurings of, oh, maybe it's time for me to step off. I think we tossed some names out of new people, but I don't remember who they are right now. So yeah, there's often luckily we don't usually have a big wave of people leaving, but like one or two will join or leave every given year, or take a step back, take a break, change roles.
It must have been a little disorienting, or maybe even disappointing, that, you know, new people, younger people came onto the committee and then their experience was not what they expected. And maybe they'll like, I want to stick around so I can get to the real thing.
Yeah. It would be interesting. I would recommend talking to Arthur Davis about that. He's one of the more recent committee members, and I think, I'm not even sure if he has had an in-person ale since he was on the committee.
Yes.
I don't remember.
That's what I thought.
But, yeah.
Anything else you want to add, Sarah? You have been an awesome font of information. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm sure there's lots more I could say. But,
any
not
other
right now.
questions you have, Susan? Okay. I'll just do a quick scan of my, I got a lot. We covered a lot.
Yeah, and I know
Yeah.
you
You
said
are
you
a
got till
great
2 o'clock,
source.
so I'm gonna stop.